The first time Miles offered to walk me home, I honestly thought nothing of it. We were leaving the office late, the kind of late where the fluorescent lights start to feel accusatory and the cleaning crew is already vacuuming around your feet like you're an inconvenience. "Which way are you heading?" he asked, shrugging into his jacket. I pointed down the block. "That way. About 10 minutes." He nodded, like he'd already decided something. "Same direction. I'll walk with you." It felt normal, friendly. Miles was like that, quietly considerate, never showy about it. Straight guy behavior, I told myself. The kind people praise without questioning. We talked about nothing important. A bug in the software we couldn't kill. The new coffee machine that somehow made worse coffee than the old one. The night air was cool, the city half asleep, and when we reached my building, he stopped a few steps back. "Well," he said, hands in his pockets, "see you tomorrow." I went upstairs without a second thought. The second night, he did it again. "Don't you get tired of babysitting me?" I joked as we waited for the crosswalk. He snorted. "Relax. I'm just making sure you don't get kidnapped." "By who?" "By literally anyone," he said deadpan. I laughed, but something about the way he looked at me, quick, assessing, then away, stuck longer than it should have. By the end of the week, it wasn't a question anymore. We shut down our computers, grabbed our coats, and walked out together like it was part of the job description. I started noticing the details. How he always walked on the street side. How he slowed his pace to match mine without saying anything. How he waited until I was inside my building before turning back, even though it added 5 minutes to his walk. "You don't have to do this," I told him one night. "Keys already in my hand." "I know," he said. "I want to." That should have been the moment I shut it down. Instead, I nodded and went inside with my heart doing something stupid and loud. Miles was straight. He talked about women the way straight guys do, casually, without depth. Dates that didn't work out. An ex he'd messed up with. Nothing emotional. Nothing lingering. I'd clocked it months ago and filed him safely under unavailable. So why did these walks feel heavy? One night, rain caught us halfway to my place. Not dramatic rain, just enough to soak your shoulders and make the streetlights blur. We ducked under an awning, laughing, closer than usual. "This is pointless," I said. "We're already wet." Miles didn't move right away. He stood there, jaw tight, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Calder," he said, then stopped. "Yeah." He exhaled slowly. "Do you ever feel like you're doing something that looks normal from the outside, but inside it's not?" My chest tightened. "All the time." He nodded, like that was both the answer he wanted and the one he was afraid of. The rain slowed. The moment passed. We kept walking. That night, lying in bed, I replayed his voice in my head. Not what he said, but how careful it sounded. Like he was stepping around something fragile and unnamed. I told myself I was projecting. That kindness doesn't always mean something more. That straight men can care without it meaning anything dangerous. But when my phone buzzed with a message from him, "You got an okay?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary. "Yeah," I typed back. "Thanks for walking me." The reply came almost instantly. "Anytime." And as I set my phone down, I realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough that I couldn't pretend these walks were still just walks. I lay there in the dark, listening to the city outside, feeling a quiet awareness settle in my chest, like the start of a question neither of us had said out loud yet. By the second week, the walks had settled into something dangerously comfortable. Not routine. Routine implies neutral but familiar, like a song you don't realize you've memorized until you catch yourself humming it. We didn't rush out of the office anymore. We lingered, packed up slowly, waited for the other one to finish typing, shutting down, shrugging into a jacket. No one commented on it. But I felt eyes, sometimes coworkers, clocking the pattern, probably assuming the simplest explanation. Two guys, same schedule, same direction. Nothing to see here. Miles asked more questions now. Not big ones. Small, careful ones. "How long have you lived in that place? Ever think about moving? You close with your family?" I answered, and then without meaning to, I started asking him things back. About his childhood. About why he'd moved to the city. About what he actually wanted, not what he'd ended up with. He never gave full answers. He spoke like someone choosing words from a limited set, aware of the edges. One night, as we crossed the park shortcut near my apartment, he slowed down. "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" he said. I felt it immediately, that quiet internal shift. The one that says, "This matters." "Sure," I said, keeping my voice light. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. You don't ever feel unsafe walking alone? The question threw me. I mean, sometimes. It's a city. He nodded, jaw tightening. Yeah, that's what I figured. I stopped walking. He took another step before realizing I wasn't beside him anymore. Miles, I said, that's not why you're doing this, is it? He turned back slowly. The streetlight caught his face just right, made him look older, more tired. No, he said. Honest. Immediate. It's not. The air between us stretched, thin and humming. But I don't really know how to explain why, he added. I studied him for a second, then nodded. Okay. He looked relieved. Not because I understood, but because I didn't push. Things changed after that. Not outwardly. We still walked. Still talked. Still stopped at my building every night. But there was a tension now, subtle and constant, like a wire pulled too tight. Sometimes our arms brushed, and neither of us moved away. Sometimes our hands almost touched when we reached for the crosswalk button, and we both noticed. Sometimes he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention and I was. Once, as we stood outside my place, he said, "You ever feel like you're waiting for something to happen?" I smiled a little too softly. What kind of something? He shook his head. Never mind. The night it almost broke open was a Thursday. Late. Cold. We were both tired, stripped down to honesty by exhaustion. You know, people probably think we're together, I said casually. Miles stopped dead. Does that bother you? He asked. I met his eyes. Does it bother you? For a long second, neither of us spoke. Cars passed. Someone laughed somewhere down the block. No, he said finally. It doesn't. Something inside me settled and something else cracked. I unlocked my door and turned back to him, keys still in my hand. You don't have to keep doing this, I said again. Not as a joke this time. I know, he said. Same answer as before. Same steady voice. I still want to. I went upstairs and didn't sleep for hours. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I admitted something I'd been circling for days. This wasn't about safety, or convenience, or habit. This was about proximity, about choosing each other in small, deniable ways, about standing close to a truth and pretending you weren't already touching it. And the scariest part wasn't that I wanted more. It was that I was starting to think he did too. The shift announced itself in small betrayals. Miles started waiting for me in the morning. Not obviously, just leaning by the elevator bank, scrolling on his phone, like he'd always been there. If I was late, he didn't comment, but I'd catch the flicker of relief on his face when I appeared. At lunch, he saved me a seat without asking. At meetings, his knee angled toward mine under the table. At 5:48, he'd glance at the clock, then at me, then pretend he hadn't. I told myself this was nothing. That closeness breeds patterns. That humans synchronize without intent. But my body didn't believe the lie. My body started anticipating him. One evening, I left early for a dentist appointment. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. You heading out already? I stared at the screen, something warm and dangerous unfurling in my chest. Yeah. Why? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Just checking. The absence of him beside me on the walk home felt louder than the city. The night everything tilted, we were both quiet. Not awkward quiet. Heavy quiet. Halfway down the block, Miles said, "Can I tell you something without it changing things?" I stopped walking. Again, I was getting good at that. That depends, I said gently, on whether you want it to. He looked at me, then really looked. No guarded smile. No deflection. I don't know what I want, he said. But I know I don't like how much I think about you. The world narrowed. Sounds dimmed. I felt suddenly, acutely present in my own body. That sounds complicated, I said. He laughed once, humorless. You have no idea. I waited. Didn't rescue him from the silence. I've always thought of myself as straight, he went on. That was the box. It fit well enough. But lately it feels like I'm forcing the lid closed with my hands. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed calm. And walking me home helps. He nodded. It gives the pressure somewhere to go. We stood there, facing each other, not touching. The space between us felt intentional now. Chosen. I'm not asking you to do anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know this isn't accidental. I swallowed. Neither is me letting it happen. His eyes softened. Not relief. Recognition. Outside my building, he didn't step back this time. I should go, he said, not moving. You don't have to. I replied, equally still. The moment stretched. Not toward a kiss. Not toward a confession. Toward understanding. Finally, he stepped away slowly, like he was relearning gravity. Thank you, he said. for not making this something I have to solve tonight. I nodded. We don't have to rush the truth just because we've found it. He smiled then. Small. Real. See you tomorrow? Yeah, I said. Tomorrow. Upstairs, I leaned against my door, heart loud, breathing unsteady but not panicked. Grounded. Nothing had happened. And yet everything had. We hadn't crossed a line. We'd acknowledged one. Named it. Agreed it existed. And somehow, that felt more intimate than anything I'd imagined. I lay in bed later, replaying the way he'd looked at me, not hungry, not confused, but open. Whatever this was, it wasn't a mistake. It was a beginning learning how to move slowly. After that night, the walks didn't stop, but they changed shape. Miles didn't offer them so openly anymore. Instead, he'd linger at his desk, pretend to reread an email, wait until I stood up first. Sometimes I wondered if he was giving me space. Other times, it felt like he was daring me to choose. I chose. Not dramatically, just by grabbing my jacket and saying, "Ready?" His shoulders would loosen every time, like he'd been bracing for disappointment he didn't want to name. We talked less on those walks. Or maybe we talked more honestly. There was less filler, fewer jokes about work. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't empty. It was observant, aware. One night, halfway to my place, he said, "I almost didn't wait today." I glanced at him. Why? He hesitated. Because it's getting harder to pretend this is casual. My chest tightened. Then why did you? He looked straight ahead. Because not walking with you felt worse. A few evenings later, something finally broke the balance. We were standing outside my building, the air sharp with early winter. I was fumbling with my keys when a guy across the street glanced at us, just a passing look. Nothing hostile, but Miles stiffened. His hand came up instinctively, hovering near my back. Not touching, just there. You okay? I asked quietly. He nodded, then stopped himself. No, actually, not really. I turned fully toward him. Talk to me. He exhaled hard. I keep wanting to do things I don't know how to explain to myself yet. Like what? He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Like putting my hand on your back and not pulling it away. Like standing this close and hoping someone assumes something true. The honesty hit me harder than any confession. Miles, I said, voice steady despite the way my heart was racing. You don't owe me clarity. But you do owe yourself permission to notice what's already here. He searched my face, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he looked too hard. What if I notice, he asked quietly, and it changes everything? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, some things are already changed. Slowly, carefully, his hand settled on my back. Warm, grounded, real. Neither of us moved away. He didn't kiss me. That mattered. Instead, he stepped back after a moment, like he needed to prove to himself that he could choose restraint. I should go, he said again, but his voice was softer now. Less defensive. Yeah, I agreed. But, thank you for trusting me with this. He nodded, eyes dark, thoughtful. You make it easier not to lie. After he left, I didn't rush inside. I stood there for a minute, hands still warm where his had been, breathing in the quiet. What we were doing wasn't dramatic. No declarations. No sudden labels. Just two people adjusting to the truth at the same speed. Later, lying in bed, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't waiting for him to decide who he was. I wasn't hoping for a moment that would force clarity. I was simply letting something real exist, unfinished, unnamed, but honest. And for the first time since these walks began, that felt like enough. The truth stopped being theoretical the night someone else noticed. We were leaving the office later than usual, the building almost empty, when a coworker from another team, Ben, harmless, observant, caught up with us near the elevators. You guys heading out together again? He said easily. Miles tensed beside me. Not dramatically, just enough that I felt it. Yeah, I said, before Miles could answer. Same route. Ben smiled. Must be nice. I barely remember what my apartment looks like anymore. He waved and disappeared into the elevator. The doors closed. The silence that followed was heavier than the conversation had been. Miles didn't look at me right away. Does that bother you? He asked. I shook my head. No. Does it bother you? He swallowed. It didn't. And that's new. We walked in quiet sync for a block before he added, I used to be really careful about how things looked. And now I'm more careful about how they feel. Something in my chest loosened at that. A few nights later, the weather turned. Wind cutting between buildings, cold enough to make excuses feel reasonable. You want to come up? I asked casually when we reached my door. Just for a minute. It's freezing. Miles hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, but because he did. Okay, he said finally. Yeah, just for a minute. Inside, the apartment was quiet, familiar, safe. I offered tea. He accepted. We stood too close in my small kitchen, shoulders brushing, neither of us commenting on it. This feels different, he said softly. I nodded. It is. He leaned back against the counter, watching me like he was memorizing details. I don't want to rush this. But I also don't want to keep pretending I'm not choosing it. I met his gaze. You already are. He stepped closer. Slow. Deliberate. Stopped just short of touching. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of you. Of how much sense this makes. That's not a bad fear, I said. He smiled faintly. It is when it rewrites your entire self-image. Still, he didn't kiss me. He reached out instead, fingers brushing my wrist, tentative, grounding. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers with his. That was enough. When he left, it wasn't abrupt. It was intentional. I'll see you tomorrow, he said, squeezing my hand once before letting go. Tomorrow, I echoed. After the door closed, I sat on the couch, heart steady, thoughts clear in a way they hadn't been in weeks. What we were building wasn't fueled by secrecy or urgency. It was built on permission given slowly, reinforced daily. Miles wasn't running from himself anymore. And I wasn't waiting to be chosen in some dramatic way. We were already choosing each other. Quietly. Repeatedly. And as I got ready for bed, I understood something that made me smile in the dark. The tension that once scared us wasn't pressure anymore. It was alignment finally settling into place. The next week felt lighter in ways that caught me off guard. Nothing outward had changed. We still worked. Still walked. Still kept our hands to ourselves in public. But something essential had shifted from restraint to intention. Miles smiled more. Not the polite, work-safe version. The real one. He laughed under his breath when our shoulders bumped in the hallway. He checked in with a glance during meetings, eyes asking quiet questions I was learning how to answer. One afternoon, he stopped by my desk without pretense. You free for lunch? He asked. It wasn't unusual, but the way he said it direct, unguarded made it different. We ate outside, winter sun low and honest. He talked about his brother, about the pressure of being the reliable one, about how certainty had always felt safer than curiosity. I thought knowing who I was meant never questioning it, he said. Turns out it just meant I didn't give myself room. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't translate, let him hear himself say it. That night, the walk home felt charged again but steadier than before. Halfway down the block, Miles slowed. Can I do something? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. He reached for my hand. No hovering this time. No testing. Just fingers sliding into place like they already knew where to go. We walked like that, quiet, deliberate, until my building came into view. No one stared. No one commented. It felt impossibly normal. Outside my door, he didn't let go right away. This doesn't feel like a crisis, he said softly. Which makes me think it's not. It doesn't have to be, I replied. He searched my face, then leaned in not to kiss, but to rest his forehead against mine. A pause. A breath shared. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, I agreed. Later, alone, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't bracing anymore. Not for disappointment. Not for a sudden retreat. Not for the moment where he'd decide this was too much. Miles wasn't experimenting. He wasn't spiraling. He was arriving. And I wasn't asking for proof. I wasn't waiting for a label or a confession that would tidy everything up. We were already living the truth in increments small enough to trust. I turned off the light and lay there, calm in a way that felt earned. Whatever came next would come honestly. And that was more than enough to meet it with an open heart. The first time Miles kissed me, it wasn't planned. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that makes no space for revelations. We'd stayed late finishing a report neither of us cared about anymore, the office empty enough to echo. When we finally left, the night felt unusually quiet, like the city had stepped back to watch. We didn't talk much on the walk. Our hands found each other without discussion, fingers warm despite the cold. By the time we reached my building, neither of us let go. I don't want to mess this up, Miles said quietly. You're not, I replied. You're here. That seemed to settle something in him. He leaned in, not rushed, not hesitant, and kissed me. It was gentle, careful, the kind of kiss that checks in even as it commits. When we pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, breath unsteady. Okay, he whispered. Not as a question, as acceptance. After that, the world didn't change, but we did. We didn't suddenly become public. We didn't label anything. But the way he looked at me in meetings softened. The way he brushed past me in the hallway became intentional. At lunch, his knee stayed pressed against mine under the table, unbothered by who might notice. One afternoon, a coworker joked, "You two are inseparable lately." Miles smiled before I could respond. "Yeah," he said easily. "Guess we are." Later, alone, I asked, "You okay with that?" He nodded. "I'm done pretending proximity is accidental." That night, walking home, he told me about the first time he'd questioned himself, about how he'd buried it under certainty and momentum, about how walking me home had started as an excuse and turned into something he didn't want to lose. "You didn't force anything," he said. "You just let me be honest near you." The honesty kept unfolding, not dramatically, gradually. Some nights we talked for hours in my living room, shoes kicked off, shoulders touching. Other nights, we just sat in silence, comfortable enough not to fill it. He stayed over sometimes. We slept tangled, not always doing more than that. One evening, as he traced absent shapes on my arm, he said, "I don't think this is a phase." I didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't need it to be anything other than real." He smiled at that, relaxed into me. In the quiet that followed, I felt something settle, something solid and earned. We weren't chasing a moment anymore. We were building continuity. Later, lying awake beside him, I realized this wasn't the story of a straight man discovering something shocking. It was the story of two people choosing each other without spectacle, of care turning into courage, of truth arriving softly and staying. And as sleep finally pulled me under, I knew the walks that started all this had done their job. They brought us exactly where we needed to be. The walks never really ended. They just changed context. Some nights we still left the office together, coats on, shoulders brushing. But now there was an ease to it, no scanning the street for meaning, no tension humming under the surface. We talked about work, about groceries, about stupid things that didn't matter. And somehow that mattered more. Miles stopped outside my building one evening and laughed quietly. "You know, we don't actually have to stop here anymore." "I know," I said, "but I like that we still do." He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. The ritual wasn't about safety or proximity anymore. It was about remembering where we started, about honoring the slow path that got us here. A few weeks later, we told people. Not everyone, just enough. One coworker raised an eyebrow. Another smiled knowingly. No one made a big deal out of it, which felt like the biggest gift of all. Miles took it in stride, steady in a way that surprised even him. "I thought this part would be scarier," he admitted one night, sitting beside me on the couch. "And?" I asked. "And it feels aligned," he said, "like I'm not editing myself anymore." He didn't redefine his past. He didn't apologize for who he'd been. He just expanded the story to make room for the truth. Watching him do that without panic, without shame, felt like witnessing courage in its quietest form. On a night much like the first, we walked home under familiar streetlights. Same route, same block, different gravity. Halfway there, he squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for not pushing, and for not leaving." I thought about it for a moment. "Thank you for walking beside me before you knew why." We stopped in front of my building, city breathing around us. He kissed me easy, unguarded, and rested his forehead against mine. "This was never about the walks," he said. "No," I agreed. "It was about choosing to keep going." Later, lying next to him in the dark, I listened to his breathing even out and felt something settle fully into place. Not fireworks, not certainty carved in stone, just two people who found each other through patience, presence, and a truth that didn't need to rush to be real. And if anyone ever asks how it started, I know exactly what I'll say. He just walked me home, and neither of us ever really turned back.